Welcome back to another episode of Know Your Legacy. I'm your host, V, and today's guest is Monica Berg. Monica is the author of a book called Fear is Not an Option. She's also the head of the Kabbalah Center, which has presence in London, LA, New York, Florida, Vegas, and with many more locations to come. So thank you so much for taking the time to be here.
Thank you for having me. It's good to be here.
No, most definitely. I think we've been trying to do this for a long time now, so I'm glad we can finally sit down and have this conversation. But you're based out in New York, is that right?
I am. We moved here 5 years ago from California.
Oh, okay. So were you born in California then?
I was actually born in Thibodaux, Louisiana, in the
Okay.
South. I lived in New Orleans until I was 9, and then Beverly Hills, and then New York. It was actually a toss-up when we moved, either to move to London or New York.
Oh, really? Wow. So what made your parents stay in New York?
Well, my husband, like 5 years ago when we moved to
5
New
years
York,
ago. I got you.
I moved with my husband and I have 4 kids. So London is our favorite place. We love it. And we're so happy there, but we felt that it was a big move in terms of work and being, speaking to all of our locations. And, you know, it'd be so much to kind of manage from London. So who knows, maybe in the future.
Yeah, no, definitely. What do you enjoy most about London?
I love I just love how clean it is. I love the energy there. It's like a big city, but then a slower pace. So you have like the best of both. I call it a glorified New York. It's like clean, doesn't smell like trash, but you have kind of like, you know, business people come through, and I feel very inspired there. I feel very creative. I love writing when I'm there. It has that unique energy for me.
Yeah. No, that's fascinating because I haven't been to New York, so I can't compare the two. But being in London, like, it's definitely very fast paced, and sometimes you do need to be in a place where you feel like you can slow down a little bit and breathe, you know, because especially if you're in the city of London, I don't know if you've used the tube or the underground transport system.
Only to go to the airport.
Oh,
But I do, but you know, there's the English countryside, which is magnificent. So I feel like you have the best of everything there.
most definitely. Yeah, no, it's beautiful in some parts, but
and let's be honest, I mean, everything sounds better in a British accent. So people
yeah.
can be like rude and it'll sound like flowers coming out. It's just, I don't know, it's something very calming.
Yeah, no, it's funny because a lot of people who are international do say that, but obviously I don't see it because I was born here. But rude is rude. But no, it's funny because a lot of people say, "Oh, you guys sound really posh," and it's just like, no, I don't know.
Yes. Yes.
But I know the book Fear is Not an Option. It talks about you being a change junkie and how to be fearless, different types of fear. But before we, I guess, dive into different concepts that you've explored there and some of the fears you had, what is a change junkie for people that don't know? And were you always one yourself?
I can hear you now.
Okay,
Can
yeah.
you hear me? Okay.
Has it come back now?
Yes.
Yeah. No, I was just saying. So before we dive into the book and I guess some of the concepts that you explore there in terms of different types of fear, your own fear, and what a change junkie is, if you could just share a little bit about what a change junkie actually is and if you were always one yourself.
So change junkie, you know, I was a Virgo, very pragmatic thinker, very linear. I love schedules. I love a good daily planner. I like a pencil with an eraser. And I find great comfort in that. But as I started my spiritual journey when I was 17, more and more it became obvious that the only way to true and lasting fulfillment and happiness is to be flexible and to embrace change. And you know, I realize we all crave change. We want things in our lives to change. We want circumstances to change, relationships to change, but we really don't enjoy change because it's painful and it's uncomfortable. But the formula here and why I call myself a change junkie is that when you seek out change and you look for experiences and opportunities for growth, for curiosity to be explored, and you seek those and you change through that process, you do become addicted to that because the rewards are amazing on the other side. And I think that my message really is, if you realize that change is necessary, it's inevitable, it happens no matter what, your only free will, your only decision is, are you going to grow and go forward with it, or are you going to grow and go backwards, right? Because you can see, sometimes you see people who are older and you remember like they weren't always like that. How did they get so set in that limited way of thinking and set in their ways? I mean, because change does happen, right? That's not the way I want to go. So I actively seek it. And I think that once you do that and you feel how liberating that is, then it's like a domino effect. Then you go and you want more and you want more, and you really do become addicted to it.
What happened at 17 then?
I don't know if it's something that happened at 17. I think that at 17, I had reached a place where I personally felt like if this is all that life had to offer, I was pretty much done and not interested. And when I say done, I would never consider taking my life or anything like that. But I remember, at age 3, 4, I have very specific memories as a child. Like I remember what I was thinking, games I was playing. I felt very connected to a force higher than me. I would have tea parties with God, as I would call it. And then when I left Louisiana, we moved to Beverly Hills, and I saw a lot of wealth. I saw tremendous, people had so many opportunities, and I saw abuse of that too, right? So I saw a lot at a very early age. And I remember looking around to my family, who I was raised in a very, very loving, very much, a very loving home, but they didn't have answers to those big questions, right? And I didn't feel safe, and I didn't feel secure. I didn't have clarity about if you look at the job, making the most money and driving the nicest car. And then after you do that, you get the best job, and then you find your husband or wife, and then the picket fence. Like, okay, and then what, right? Those didn't seem like a destination. Those seems like things that you kind of attain, you acquire, which is different than. So at 17, I think what kind of really brought this on is that all my friends were going away to school. I grew up in a very strict Middle Eastern home, and I felt a little left behind. And that triggered me to, I developed an eating disorder then. I had anorexia. And I also was just very curious about, there has to be something more. And then I stumbled across the wisdom of Kabbalah. And from that point on, it gave me the answers that I was looking for, and it gave me a sense of purpose and meaning to my life and to who I wanted to become and where I wanted to put my efforts.
That's interesting, because I guess growing up, who your parents are and the environment you're in can really shape who you become by the age of 17, 18, when you actually start questioning, or you're old enough to question, actually, is this the road that I want to continue down, or do I want to change? So what were your parents doing at the time? Like, what did they do?
It's an interesting question. My father was a self-made millionaire, and by the time we moved to Beverly Hills, he had lost all of his wealth. So it was a very difficult time in my home. And my mother, who hadn't worked ever in her life, then became the supporter of the family. And my father really struggled. So that was scary in and of itself. And then I watched my father spend the rest of his life trying to create what he had lost. And I remember that, again, that was something that didn't make sense to me. I can understand wanting to create wealth again. I get that desire for sure. But it seemed like that was the only currency for him in life, was to be rich. And if he was rich, then his life would be valued, or then he would be happy, or then, right? It was all, and then if I get this, then I will be this. And he chased that his whole life. And I just saw so many opportunities for connection, for joy, for spirituality, for so many other things that he wouldn't invest in, because all of that was after he would make the money again. And I love my father dearly. It's not to say anything, he has dementia now. So I saw him chase that dream until he could no longer remember the dream. And that, I think, was terrifying and painful. And then as my mother worked full time, but she still held the Middle Eastern role of, then cooking and cleaning and doing it all. And I thought, well, I don't want that either. That doesn't seem right. Like, so it kind of, I often say this, your parents teach you really so many things. Often they teach you what you can be, what you want to be, and often they teach you what you don't want to be. And that's not a bad thing. That's just the reality. So for me, that was kind of the breaking point where I was watching all of this for years. And I guess as I was going to enter college, it was like, okay, now you're going to be responsible for your own life and your future. And that woke me up in a big way.
So you didn't ever feel pressured that you had to follow in the footsteps of your mom or dad or anyone else in your family? I don't know if you had older siblings as well.
Yeah, I'm a middle child. We're three sisters. I don't believe, I have certain things that I know completely to be true, right? I don't believe, and I never did, even before I found Kabbalah, I don't believe we're meant to suffer. I think things will happen that create pain, that can be painful, but it's up to us to find the gift in it, the opportunity. So I never believed, even if I hadn't made the connection that we can make something else out of it, I just didn't believe in suffering. And I also don't believe in you're supposed to, you should have, you could have. I don't believe in those terms. I don't believe you're supposed to live your life like that. And I think that I would never fall to pressure because I would look around at all of the adults around me and the grown-ups, and I would see that they weren't happy. So it became very obvious to me that this isn't something that I'm going to enjoy. And it's not somewhere that I want to put my time. It's just not going to create the life that I want.
Yeah, no, it takes a lot of analysis and courage to make that conclusion, especially if you're like, you're not the eldest person in the family and you've got parents where, especially in Asian backgrounds, where you think, oh, I have to listen to them, or you feel pressured to be pigeonholed in a certain box, because a lot of people do. To then step back and say, actually, this isn't working, so why should I follow it? Like, you're telling me to do a certain thing, or you expect a certain thing of me, but you're not living up to that. You're not happy with what you're living up to. So it doesn't make sense why you'd follow those lessons on to me. So I'm glad that you're a beacon of light in that sense, to show that you don't have to follow that. You can do your own thing. So
I get these questions a lot from people that I mentor and students that I have, and they say, so-and-so said I should do that. And they feel tremendous weight and pressure and guilt. And I always stop and say, okay, well, do you respect how they're living their lives? No judgment, but like, is that a role model for you? Like, do you want to mirror that behavior? Do you want to mirror that lifestyle? If you do, great, then you should absolutely listen to what they're saying. But if you find flaw in that, and that's ultimately not who you want to become or where you want to end up, why are you putting so much weight in their opinions or their words? So like, that's the first place to start for anybody. You want to mirror the people that you really want to aspire to become like, right? We can all learn from people, and we should, but mirror the ones that are actually living the life that you envision for yourself.
yeah, no, it makes complete sense. It makes complete sense, because if someone hasn't got what you want, then why would you listen to them in that particular area? I'm not saying everything, because one person might have great relationship, like their relationship might be going really well, but they haven't sorted out their wealth. They don't have all the money. So maybe for relationship advice, you go to them. But then for wealth, you have to go to someone else. So there's not just one role model. You might have multiple. So it makes a ton of sense. But so did you go to college then after that, or you didn't?
I did. I went to a community college, then I transferred to university, and then I decided to, I guess I've always kind of been like this, to go off and really put my time and energy where I found the most value. And that was in eventually teaching the wisdom of Kabbalah, and then, becoming a writer and following that whole path.
So how did you come across the wisdom of Kabbalah in the first place?
Well, it's interesting because, so I said earlier, I felt very spiritual when I was younger, and then I went to Beverly Hills High School, and there was a whole TV show on this school in the United States. It was called 90210, and I went very far, I think, from who I am at my core. And I remember looking at pictures from my childhood, and I would get teary-eyed because I almost couldn't recognize myself anymore with who I saw. And it's not that I was doing horrible things, it just wasn't in line with my integrity, right? And who I knew I could become. So my parents were very worried at the time, and they had started studying Kabbalah. and they really wanted me to come. So we went to this trip in Israel together. They took me. My father actually took me. And there was there were students there from the Kabbalah Center, and they started talking about different teachings like past lives, reincarnation, different reasonings for things. And it was the first time I felt like I had come home. Like the things that I had heard, I had known. I had heard them before. The people that I met even were familiar to me. And from that moment on, just something kind of sparked. And I knew I found my purpose. I didn't know to what degree. I didn't know how involved I'd be, but I knew that now I had a compass. I had a direction. I had the answers I had been searching for forever. Like, why are we here? What are we meant to do? Why do bad things happen to good people? Like everything suddenly, all those questions I had my whole life until that point, I finally had a source to go and find the answers.
That's amazing, because not a lot of people have that outlet. Like they haven't found that thing for them that sits well with them, because there's so many disciplines of knowledge and wisdom that are being shared today, and you can just Google it like and easily find something with the power of the internet now. But for those who don't know, what is Kabbalah?
Well, it's an ancient wisdom, and I think that's how it's different than there's many things we can all practice, and there's many things that complement different spiritualities as well. But Kabbalah is an ancient wisdom that explains the complexities between the material and non-material world. So for thousands of years, Kabbalists have taught that every human being is born with the potential for greatness, and Kabbalah is a remarkably effective means to manifest that. And it's all about activating your potential. And it's an action word, right? That's what I love about Kabbalah. It's all about change, growth, transformation, connection, purpose, meaning. I mean, that's endless.
So, and is that where you got the idea of being a change junkie? Do you think it was born from there?
I think that everything that I offer and that I write about and that I think about for sure stems from where I get my sustenance from my spirituality. Um, Absolutely.
Mm. So where did the book come into play then? Like how far down the timeline was it before you started thinking, actually, you know what, I want to put words to paper now?
Well, it's interesting because while I take what I do very seriously, I don't take myself very seriously. So I never considered myself a writer. Um, and then over time, I just started to feel like there was something I really had to say, and I just had to get it out. And so I started writing. And the more I started to write, the more I enjoyed it, the more I realized I had things to say. So actually, the first book I wrote is called Rethink Love, and it's going to be coming out soon. And that took me years to write because, again, I had no practice in that. And it's a mammoth book. It's like 66,700 words. And then I got impatient in the process, and I wrote my second book, which is my first book, Fear is Not an Option. And those two topics, fear and relationships, when I would meet with students, those were the two primary issues or themes that would come up, right? So people either, relationships are amazing until they're not, or, it's like the best thing that ever happened to us, or it's the worst thing. And it goes from different stages, right? It's different things to a person. And the other was fear. And fear, has the ability to stop people in their tracks from being too paralyzed to even think about manifesting their potential. And it can make you really live a life that is not what you want, so that became, and that was I wrote that in like a few months. So I think that like the first book I wrote really trained me, and I learned how to unpack information, how to think, how will people even though I know it so well, like if I know a concept and I think, okay, everybody knows about consciousness, right? And those are topics we talk about today. Whereas, 10 years ago, that wasn't so popular, or power of words or power of thoughts. So that whole process, I think, has kind of helped me with that. And then my third book that I'm working on is called Change Junkie.
Okay,
So it's
amazing.
basically the things that, I've been married for 22 years um, to the same person. So I've had many different experiences with one man, right? And I think, and I've been to hundreds of weddings because my husband's a rabbi as well. So I've had the opportunity to see people at different stages of their relationships, when they were dating, engaged, the first year of marriage. And from my experience of 22, there's a lot, there are many formulas and techniques that are across the board that will work. So that's all offered in that book. And fear, I'm very proud of. Fear is not an option because, you know, if it's not an option, then you have to find something else that is. Again, it's a very proactive approach to eradicating fear from your life.
So would you say you're fearless now?
I would say I'm human. So we all have moments where fear comes up. But the thing that is really powerful is that as soon as I recognize something that might make me feel uncomfortable, because I don't even think it fully develops into a fear, I absolutely break it down. So for instance, and I'll give you an example. If, you know, I wrote about this in my book. When my kids I had 3 at the time, and my second son was born with Down syndrome, which I also discuss in the book. So after I had him, 3 months later, I got pregnant with my 3rd child. And, you know, I always talk about before Josh and after Josh. Before Josh, I thought I was fearless, but I wasn't really fearless. But I loved, you know, I loved to go to adrenaline rush. You know, if anybody needed, like children had a loose tooth, I would pull it, blood, and nothing bothered me. Like I was the calm, cool, collected person you would call in an emergency. But then after I had him, and then I had my daughter, my adrenal glands were just shot. You know, I didn't find out he had Down syndrome until a few hours after he was born. There's shock, there's trauma, there's, you know, grief. There's all these things you experience because it's not that he wasn't the healthy child I thought was growing inside of me. I had to get my head, my body, my mind had to come together to accept the reality of what was. And in the end, he's the most amazing gift, but that is a process. And I allowed myself that. But so we went
Sorry, I
on the
lost
first
you.
roller.
Sorry, I lost
Oh,
you. I lost you there for a second. You said, yeah, he was the most amazing gift.
okay. So I don't know where I left off, but he's the most amazing gift. But my body, mind, and spirit all had to come together to accept that, right? To appreciate all that he is in the way that he came to the world. Um, so after, you know, a bit, again, I felt like my adrenals were not, I was just not the same person in many ways, but I thought it would be fun to go to an amusement park because I used to really enjoy roller coasters, be a nice day, thrill, you know, get the adrenaline again. And my husband doesn't love heights, but I convinced like everybody this would be really fun. We get on the first roller coaster and it's inching up, you know, when they're like, they're building anticipation. And off to the left is this bear waving happily, right? And it's supposed to be adorable, but I saw it as a sign of like something dreadful about to happen. And this is the last happy thing I'd ever seen in my life. And I remember I started to get terrified. My palms were sweaty, my heart's racing, and I'm thinking, oh my God, I have to get off this ride. I'm going to die. Like that is how it felt. And I was shocked by the feeling because again, I used to love that. And I actually had the thought that I can just jump off on the platform next to the bear and I don't have to, because there was room and it's going slow enough and I don't have to go on this ride. And then I caught the thought and the thought was scarier than the actuality of riding the roller coaster, right? Can you imagine? I'm like, oh my God, I'm crazy. I'm going to make the evening news. I'm going to embarrass my family. I'm never going to live this down. So I obviously stayed on the ride. But what I did that day is I forced myself to go on every single roller coaster in the park. Not that I was having the best day, but I knew that if I didn't do that, a new fear would have developed. So today, if something comes up, I absolutely embrace it. I break it down and I go all the way with it. So it never can manifest into a fear. And that's one of the tools, right? If you look at something that terrifies you and you say, okay, I'm going to go all in here. I'm going to break it down. I'm going to accept it. And you don't allow it to manifest. It's not going to have control over you.
Yeah, it's the conscious way to deal with it, right? It's just to take a step back from your emotions, break it apart from your identity, because again, it's about untangling yourself with your emotions. People identify themselves with their emotions, which is easy to do because that's just how we're born. But then it takes, I guess, a conscious process to break away from that, and then you can analyze and say, okay, is this helping me, or is this gonna, you know, pull me back from what I want to do. And actually, the way I see it, I don't know, you can tell me from your experience if this is true for you, but I see emotions as indicators. So, okay, what is it telling me about this particular moment right now? And where, how should I use this to maneuver the situation I'm in? So it's interesting with fear. I guess you could use it as a trigger to grow then.
It's so funny you say that. I say all the time, emotions are just indicators. Like it's in my next book, because the thing is people take their emotions so seriously and then they become the emotion. So now I'm feeling sad, I must be a depressed person. Or I'm feeling angry, I've got anger issues. No, these emotions are set up to show you that something you are doing is making you feel uncomfortable, or it's something that you need to change or work on or grow from. So don't become the emotion. Analyze it, take a step away, look at it, and see what the opportunity there for you is. And it's the same thing with the fear, 1,000%. And I think that, you know, a lot of it is consciousness, and that's why it takes work, right? Consciousness is like a muscle, and you know, if you work it hard and you work on growing it and expanding it, it's a stronger one, and you're able to see anything that happens to you that you didn't want as an opportunity and see the gift in it, and go forward from there. But if you don't work on your consciousness, just like a muscle, it gets really low, and then everything is chaotic, everything is horrible, and it's not a way to live, really. When we moved to New York, there's one fear, because I break fear down into 3 different types in my book: illogical, real, and healthy. But I had an illogical fear of elevators my whole life, like from when I was a child. I even said to my mom, like, did you lock me in a small box when I was little? Because I don't know where this is coming. I mean, I would panic and hyperventilate. But then when we moved to New York, and I carried that fear most of my life, by the way. And like I've climbed 20 flights of stairs after a 15-mile run, because I was so thirsty and sweaty that to get stuck in an elevator and be parched and not have my cell phone on me was terrifying. So I would climb, like, and even in heels, I've done that. So when I moved to New York, as before I wrote the book, you know, in New York, you're going to be in an elevator like every day. You cannot escape it. My desire to move was greater than the fear. So I just decided it wasn't going to come with me. And I released it just like that. But again, I've been working on my consciousness for a very long time, but everybody can do this. It's absolutely doable.
You know what's funny? Like the more you talk about it, the more all of these topics you're talking about, relationships, fear, change, it all and then obviously the fact that you practice Kabbalah, it all comes down to just mastering yourself. Because if you can do that, then all of these things are within that anyway. It falls within that topic, and so you can pull the strings on any of these things. It's just that you do it in the exact same way. It's just about being conscious of what's going on and then dealing with it in the right way. I don't know if you resonate with that.
1,000%. I actually am going to write this down. Master of yourself. I like that. Maybe that'll be another book.
Yeah.
The thing is, no, because that's the thing. I think people, again, it goes back to how I felt in high school. People are chasing all these things that are external, right? The external things will bring me happiness, money, cars, the perfect spouse, and then I'll be fulfilled. It's only going to come from an internal space. And that's attached to a different realm, right? So in the 1% reality, it's the 5 senses. It's all the things that we hear, taste, smell, and we make decisions based only on that. That all feeds external. Internal is the 99%. It's the bigger picture. It's your intuition, your gut, energy. It's us right now on Zoom, being able to talk. You're in London, I'm in. It's these things that we rely on, that work that we don't really have access to, right? That's the part we need to grow. And that's the part that we're not raised with. I mean, I'm raising my children like that, but I certainly wasn't raised with this kind of dialogue or conversation, that you should spend more time focused on what's inside, who you are, your soul potential, your growth, than acquiring things. That's not the understanding.
Yeah, the thing is, once you, because I was talking to a friend about this, once you focus on that internal work enough, you become the value of what you seek. And so you naturally attract it. Because if you, I don't know if this is taught in the Kabbalah as well, I'm sure it is. Obviously, you know more than I do, but the world works on vibration, like the realm that we're in, at least anyway, it works on vibration. And so if you can tune yourself through internal work to get to a certain level, a certain state of joy or happiness, whatever it is, the things that are associated with that you desire in your life will come into it naturally, because you're living at that level. I don't know if that makes sense.
It absolutely does. And I'm going to help you define that. Often people, when we're talking about relationships, they say, oh, how do I attract the one? I want my soulmate, whatever that means. Because I think that can be confusing for people too. And I say, it's not so much looking out, whatever it is that you're searching for, you have to make sure that you are that yourself first. And once you grow who you are, you become the person that you really desire to be with, then you're going to attract a mate on that level, right? If you just attract somebody right now from this space that like, I want love and I want to feel good and I want to have a life partner, and you can even be a sharing person, you can be a kind person and a good person, but it will still be limited. Imagine if you start to peel back the layers and you really dissect who you are and you keep challenging yourself to become a better version of who you are, you're going to attract that higher level of soul too. And that is what it's all about. And it's not just in relationships, it's in everything.
Yeah, most definitely. I think it can be applied to everything. And the other thing I was going to ask you as well is recently I've been diving into the Hermetic principles in the Kabbalah. So I don't know if that's something that you've read about or you've come across in your work. But again, those are seven fundamental principles of the universe that can be applied to any area of your life: health, wealth, love, relationships. And as I've studied it more and more, I've realized if you can master these basic principles, then you can begin to master every area of your life. It doesn't become a struggle because that level of thinking, that mindset is applicable to all areas. And then all you have to do is figure out, okay, how do I apply this to the partner that I want? How do I apply this to the money that I want? How do I apply this to finding purpose in my life? So I don't know if that's something that the Kabbalah teaches, or even if they're interlinked.
Yeah, because it's all about expanding consciousness. My father-in-law, Rav Berg, would say consciousness is everything. So when you start to see the world in this way, you're almost, you're in the world, but you're not of the world. You're almost operating from this higher level where you're looking down and you're an observer. And from that space, you're able to make better decisions for yourself. You choose a better environment. You're with like-minded people, and everything becomes kind of, instead of being reactive and fear-based and I have to do this way, you're almost like removed from it and you say, okay, I have all these options, right? It's like a different level, in a different playing field. And that's the point of all of this conversation and all the things that I write about. It's to help people to start thinking about their life in a different way, believing that they can actually have that, and then giving them the tools to create it.
What's been the most, I guess, fascinating or surprising lesson that the Kabbalah has taught you so far?
There's so many. I think the biggest one is that the process is the purpose, because so often we focus on a goal and we have a desired outcome. And then when that outcome isn't what we thought it would be, we think the whole thing was a waste of time. Even putting energy in people, right? Friendships, maybe they won't last and you're so invested. I love this friend. We're going to be best friends for 20, 30 years. And then if that somehow doesn't happen, then, oh, I got so hurt by them. That's one way to look at life. Another way is to say, wow, that process of 30 years, I grew, we shared love, we shared different memories. Maybe we don't have a space in each other's life anymore, but it was never supposed to be. It's not about that outcome, right? It's everything you learn in the journey along the way. That's where the real value is. And maybe you will end up at the goal that you had set out, but it's irrelevant. It's insignificant, really, because the process is the purpose.
I've never heard it being put that way, and I like that because I talk to a lot of people on this show about like happiness and what joy means to them and things of that nature, because everyone comes from a different background. So it's interesting to see what their journeys taught them. And one thing that stays stable between everyone is that they find joy or happiness in the actual journey. Like there is no, like your dad, for example, he's a prime example of someone who waited, and then it just becomes too late. You can't do that. And even to get a bit more scientific, something that I'd learned, which really fascinated me, was if you do that, you're literally rewiring your brain to expect happiness in the future. So yeah, okay, you make $1 million. Now you've got the car. Now you've got 5 kids, whatever. I don't know. You're retired. You still think that happiness has to be found in the future because that's how you've wired your brain. And so it doesn't make sense to do that. It's just to be happy every single day, knowing that, okay, my time is limited. I value my time, and so I'm going to enjoy this journey as it unfolds, because that's all you really have.
Absolutely. And also some people are living in the past too, right? So it's either I'll be happy in the future, or they remember the past as happy, and then there's no present. That's it. You're taking away each and every day. There's a Kabbalistic teaching that in each day there's a unique energy, and what you can achieve in this day can only be achieved in this day, right? So there's always opportunities, but there's something significant in each and every day. That's how the universe works. So I find that so empowering and so liberating. Every day I'm searching for opportunities. I don't know what the opportunities are. I have my plan. I know what my goals are for the day, but if something else comes up, I'm always so open and ready to accept it, because I trust that there, I don't have all the information, and if it's coming to me, it's for my greatest good, and I grab it.
That's a good way to see it, just to be open-minded, and for you to feel like you have to make the most of today, because today holds something special that tomorrow won't have. And if you
and tomorrow will be something else special, but right, exactly.
But you've missed the gift of today, whatever that may be, but I'm interested to know, now that you've learned this and you've sort of you're deep into believing this wisdom, how does that affect the way that you raise your kids? Because I'm sure, I don't know how old they are, I'm sure they vary in age, but depending on the things they come out to you with in terms of the problems that they have with school, with friends, whatever it is, how is that changed compared to maybe some of the friends that you see who don't follow the faith and raise their kids?
No, it's so interesting. I have 4 kids. They are big range. My oldest is 20. My youngest is 5.5. So I really so appreciate having access to this wisdom, because I think that it changes everything. I'm not the kind of parent that likes to handhold. I don't like those kinds of I never have personally. I don't like codependent relationships. I don't like any of that. I'm like, personally, for me, right? So with my kids, I've been really aware to not make their process or their journey my journey. So even if I have an idea of what I want each one of my kids to be, I never want to make it about that. I want to hear their desires, and I see my role as helping them just manifest what it is they want to manifest. I want to help guide them. I want to give information to them. And honestly, the real influence when it comes to parenting is before the child is 12 or 13. It's all of the wisdom that you give them then. It's the tools. So even now, when my 5.5-year-old is afraid of something, I don't say don't be afraid, or there's no such thing as this and that. I talk about fear. Well, if you're afraid of this, we all have fears, but let's look at what this is. And I want to give each of them tools of how to deal with their own emotions when things come up. So even bullies at school or whatever it is, I want to speak to them and have them come up with the solutions and talk about it, so that they are now armed with all of the tools, all the information that they will need to weather the more difficult things later in life when they're more independent, when they're on their own. That's my approach to parenting. It's never about even come to me, I have all the answers. It's about really giving them all of the wisdom, all of the information, to be able to start to learn to hear their intuition, to trust that feeling that we all have. Like all of those things that I had to really search for to acquire, I try to give it to them at every stage of their lives.
I love that, because you're basically saying, here's the tools, and now you go and explore yourself.
Yeah, and again, I'm always here as a supporter, as a guide. But I really, some people have a real kind of sense of, I mean, it's going to come out wrong, but like ownership over their children. I see that I'm just like a vessel that they came through, my body, and my husband and I are just here to help guide them. And of course there's that connection and there's love and all of that, but I never want to make their journey part of something that I feel I should have done or shouldn't have done, or because I don't even live like that, right? Everything I wanted to do, I'm doing, and everything I didn't want to do, I don't do anymore, right? So it's just a different kind of perspective. And I think that I think that it's hopefully going to make them strong thinkers and spiritual people who want to give back.
Yeah, I'm sure they will, because I think giving them the independence and space to grow is probably the most important thing, because they have to come to their own conclusions and judgments. Even if you push your own opinion onto them, eventually what will happen is they'd want to go and not rebel, but test what the opposite looks like, and then
Mhm.
come to a conclusion themselves. So it makes.
Whenever, when they come and ask me something, I always first say, well, what do you think about it? What do you feel about it? 'Cause I really want, we all have the answers. We go through life and we assign other people to know better than us, right? So the doctor, of course, would know more about my health because, well, they're a doctor. The police officer would know more, or I mean, we assign people that above us, and I don't believe in that. I think that, of course, you can ask experts for their opinions, but at the end of the day, it has to sound authentic to you. It has to feel right to you because you are living in your body. This is your mind. This is your spirit. If something doesn't align, I don't care if the smartest person in the world is telling you this is right for you. If it doesn't feel right, it's not right. So again, that's like, I just think that those are really powerful things that everybody should understand that they have.
Yeah, it's just about taking ownership of their mind, body, and soul again, and just trusting themselves. I think the whole thing about gut feeling and intuition is something that's foreign to a lot of people, because we live in such a busy world. We were talking earlier about living in London, living in New York, and these busy places. And I think that when you're in that kind of zone, it's important to take some time just to reflect quietly, whether it's at the end of the day or the beginning of the day, to draw all the energy back that you're putting out every day through relationships, through work, through social media, whatever it might be. You need to recharge, and you can't do that if you're doing, if you're on the go 7 days a week. So do you take time to do that each day? I don't know what your sort of morning or evening routine looks like, and if you have one.
I'll tell you, I just want to add one more thing to what we were saying. I think that there's a real danger also in assigning people to be the authority over you. And when we do that time and time again, we shut off that part that is intuitive. And that's why a lot of people don't have the answers to their problems, or they don't know what to do, or they think, somebody else, again, is smarter, more spiritual, is the authority. And if we slow that down, right, and say, okay, I'm going to find value in what so-and-so is saying, but what do I think? I just think it's such an important process. So I just wanted to touch upon that again, because I don't think that people do that. And I know that when you turn it off, and again, you start to go external versus internal, it becomes further and further away. And then you find yourself later in life, like not knowing what you want to do, not knowing how you ended up where you were, right? And it's called midlife crisis. But so, yeah. So in terms of your second question, my routine, yeah, I work out. I used to be a marathon runner, so every morning I do a 2-hour workout, and for me, that's my meditation, because it's very difficult. It's 1 hour of dancing. It's like nonstop with different routines, and 1 hour of muscular structure. And when I'm doing that, it's so hard physically that mentally I'm completely somewhere else, and a different part of my brain is open to hearing. Like, I think about all the things that I need to find an answer to, or things that I'm trying to work through. And I'm telling you, at the end of those 2 hours, I walk out with a solution. I walk out with a plan. I mean, every single day. So for me, that's the more my body's in movement, that's my meditation. And then aside from that, I do pray every day. And I think that, and I have a gratitude journal. So the prayer and the gratitude is to really just have appreciation for waking up in the morning, for being given the gift of another day, for the fact that my body is working, that I can breathe. Like there's so much we take for granted. It's like automatic. Yeah, wake up. My body's always done X, Y, and Z. Will always do that. No, it's really important to stop, because I think it's so easy to focus on all the things we're lacking and that we wish we had, or that we desire. And yes, desire is absolutely important, but it needs to first come from that place of gratitude. From there, bring in more, sure, but it has to be elevated. So I would say those are the three. And again, my message will always go back to body, mind, and spirit, because they all have to be operating, and they all come together to support you on this journey.
Yeah, I love that, because I do the same thing, and I think that we take so much of our own bodies for granted. Like something as simple as waking up in a warm bed. Like that's not something that everyone around the world gets to do, especially if you're in the winter. That's when you appreciate it the most. Something as being able to see again, breathe, your heart beating, all of these things that we're talking about. You don't, in relation to the body, you don't have to consciously do. It's all being regulated for you. Like we have a set of biology that regulates itself. That's not, you can't even you don't even know what's going on inside. You can't describe your own biology. That's how complicated it is. So you're walking around being automated, and you can't take that for granted. When it breaks down, that's most likely because you've taken some part of your body for granted. So I'm glad that you do that, and I hope that people listening, really think about that, because at the end of the day, that comes down to just respecting yourself, finding some love to look after yourself, take some time away to regather your energy, to heal your mind, body, and spirit before you give to others. Because you can't give if you've got an empty cup. You need to refill your cup every day so you can give it to others.
Yeah, one of the things I say a lot in my messaging is that you alone are responsible for the quality of your life. So if you love what you do more of it. If you don't love what you do, don't do it. And if you don't know what you love, it's time you find out, because there's no greater pain than the pain of regret. Because once you're there and the opportunity is lost, you can't go back. You can be stuck in that pain forever. So I rather the pain of discipline. And I don't see discipline as painful. I think people initially do. But when you're disciplined in things that are important and purposeful, you can be ensured that you're going to live the life that you really desire to live, that you're destined to live.
So if someone's listening to you right now and they're thinking, all right, so Monica's talking about doing something that you love, and if I don't love it, then I should just leave it. And if they're in a 9-to-5, or if they're in a job and they don't, they're not particularly happy with where they're at, they can't just drop it the next day. So how would you advise them to transition into what they want to do, or even figuring out, what is it that I'm passionate about? What is it that I want to do?
Well, I think that first thing is to remove fear. I think that people who are in a 9-to-5 job, and let's say they're supporting their family and they need the money and they're worried, and I understand all of that. But if you're afraid, you're not going to be able to have clarity. So first is to remove the fear. I'm not saying that anybody should quit their job right away and not have a plan. I'm not saying that at all. But I think the first thing is to say, okay, what is it that I really enjoy doing? When do I feel the most alive? When do I feel the most excited? Because we know the most successful people and the happiest people are those that are doing things they love. When you do what you love, you're successful in it because you're all in. You're motivated, you're passionate, you're inspired. So it's a full plan. Some people never got to find out what they like, but you can. By having. How many people start podcasts today, right? A lot of people have 9-to-5 jobs and then they have podcasts at different hours of the day. I'm just saying start something, anything. Before I started writing and teaching, I used to be actually afraid of public speaking when I first started years and years ago. I was really like, I can't do this. So I like to bake. I enjoy baking. I like to make it gluten-free and dairy-free, and it's organic. So I would play around with recipes. So that was like a spark. I call it my modest spark. It's something I enjoyed. It's something I did well. And I would bake like 15 desserts and give it to the neighborhood. It was just something I really enjoyed doing, but it wasn't my desire. It wasn't my end all be all. It wasn't my purpose. I knew that. But while I was doing that, I was baking, I would think about things I'd want to speak about. I'd think about creative ideas. I would start to think about what my real spark was, right? And I remember the first time that I actually got up and I broke the fear and I spoke at my first public talk, I never felt more alive and more connected to something greater than me. And it just felt like it's what I was meant to do all along. Everybody has that. So start any which way. It's not going to be perfect, and take small steps every day towards that. But two things: you got to remove the fear, and you have to believe that you're worthwhile to have the best of everything. If you don't think, well, it's not going to happen.
Sorry, the last bit just got off there. You said if you don't think
that you're deserving of something better, then it's never going to manifest. You have to think you're deserving of something great. And that greatness isn't a sign for the person next to you or the lucky person down the road or your lucky cousin across the continent. You have to believe that you are destined for greatness also, just simply because you exist. We all are.
Mm. Yeah, no, definitely. And I think it can be a deep-rooted fear, not fear, but deep-rooted belief that most people don't deserve what they actually want. They don't realize that they've been conditioned to believe you're not good enough in some shape
Hmm.
or form at some point, and then they self-sabotage. Then they don't take the action that they're supposed to, because it's like, what's the point, for X, Y, and Z reason. So I'm glad you
A
touched on
thousand
that.
percent. 1,000%. And then also the fear of rejection, and it's better not to try than to fail. I mean, there's all those false belief systems. So that all has to just be removed, I
See, the
think.
funny thing is, all of this being said and done, it all comes back to mastering yourself, like the bird's eye view. Like, if you can do the internal work, all of this will become clear to you. So then you can dissect every area and be like, okay, if this is wrong or this situation's come up, I've got this question. It's just, I'm going to look internally and sort this out, because you have a um set number of principles or beliefs or habits that you follow, that you can always revert back to and say, okay, how does this apply to that? And then let me answer the question. Let me break down the problem. And that's what you're doing. So I'm glad that you've combined your spirituality and the faith and the wisdom that you have to all of these issues that you've got, because you seem to be tackling them really well.
Yeah, I don't believe in suffering.
What would you say is the proudest thing that you've done so far?
Oh, that's a big one. You know what it is? The thing that makes me most proud is that I was able to drown out the negative beliefs and noise and opinions of other people and judgments, and really believe that I'm worthwhile and really love myself unconditionally. And that took a long time to get there. And when I did, then everything started to unfold. Because it's so easy to believe the bad things you hear about yourself. It's so easy to believe that you don't have what it takes. And I'm not saying even in terms of success. I'm saying in terms of being a happy, authentic person arriving on their own terms. That I think I'm most proud of.
I love that. So, people who are listening or who've listened this far in so far, they're thinking, all right, she's fearless. She's got it all sorted out. She's a change junkie. She embraces life. She gets to, she attacks problems head on. Like, she doesn't have any issues. Like, can you shed some light on maybe one of your darkest moments? Or if you were to think about your past or the life that you've lived so far, what's been the most struggling time for you?
Well, I've had a lot at different stages. I think the most significant, uh, which I really haven't spoken about, but there was somebody that really did a character assassination on me. So he basically, for 2 decades, had been destroying my character, and a lot of people believed it, and I didn't know that was happening. And then the day that I realized it, because the one thing people can take from me that you can never get back is your character, right? If I say so much gossip about you and people don't know you, they'll either believe it, and some will never change their minds. There's this parable that I love. It's about this boy is in town, and he sees his coach. It's like a small town, and he sees the coach of their baseball team taking an apple off the stand in the street. And he goes around and he spreads this rumor that their coach is a thief. Now none of the kids want to go. The parents won't send them to the baseball. He doesn't know what's happened, right? And he goes to and this boy goes and spreads around. He goes to the one of the people that spread the rumor, and he said, "Why did you say this?" He's like, "Well, so and so said you took an apple." He said, "Well, what you don't realize is that I went and I paid for it in the morning, and then in the afternoon after practice I took the apple." Right? The fact that they never saw him paid for it, they assumed, they spread the rumor. So the boy's like, "Well, I didn't make it up. I just repeated it." He said, "You know what? Go get a pillow." So he's, "What?" He says, "To go get a feathered pillow." He takes a pillow. He says, "Now cut a hole through it." And it was a windy day, and all the feathers blow out of this pillow all over. And the coach says to the boy, "Now go and collect all the feathers." And he said, "I can't. It's impossible." And he said, "Exactly. That's the same thing as when you gossip about somebody. you're not going to be able to go back and repair that and take that away. So I think that that for me was the most painful thing, because my intention's always been to help people. And I felt on some level that that had been taken away from me. But again, I don't believe in suffering, and I don't believe in being a victim. So I really grew from that, and it really pushed me to be a better person, not to gossip, not to judge, but also to know that I really like who I am, and I really believe in who I am, and not to let anybody's words ever bring me down.
You know what the funny thing is, that the person must have had a lot of time on their hands to want to do
I
that.
think they were busy with they were chasing the wrong thing. Yeah.
Yeah.
Because all the other things, I think, again, having a child born with Down syndrome, having anorexia, seeing my father have dementia, my uncle was schizophrenic. It's in my book too. And it happened, it looked like it happened overnight, and I was only 8 years old. It was terrifying. Those were all scary things, but I think those are part of life, and those were difficult. But this was somehow different, because it was so far from what like my intentions were, like it was so far from what I was doing and offering. And I just felt that something was taken. Do you know what I mean? But even with that, it was the biggest lesson, because nobody can really take anything from you unless you let them, really.
No, that's true. That's true. And I'm happy and proud to see that you've come this far and overcome that, because now obviously other people who are listening are going to be inspired to do the same. And if they're not listening, hopefully they've read your book, or will hear about you through another outlet. But just to get into the final few questions, then, if you had a microphone and the whole world could hear you, what would be the one message you'd share with them?
I would say consciousness is everything.
I love that. And what do you think is the biggest lie we're being told right now?
The lie?
Yeah.
Oh gosh, so many in today's day and age. That certain people are more important than others, and that money is power and power is power. None of that is real. I think that the biggest lie is that some people are inherently better than others and more worthy of good things than others.
I think a few people have said that already, and it's crazy, because one person summed it up well. He said, when I asked him that question, he said, "You are enough." That's literally it. It is that, regardless of what you look like, the background you come from, the color of your
All of
skin,
it.
age, all of that stuff. Like the fact that you were born here, and I've said this before, is something crazy, like 400 trillion sperm to one. Why is it that your sperm was chosen? Even if you think it's silly, just think about that for a second. It's not just one. There's millions, hundreds of millions. Yours was chosen. So then now you were transported here and delivered here for some sort of reason. And that's the fun, to find out now, from now to the end, what is the reason and what can I do about it? So I'm glad you're living your truth, and you're delivering your wisdom to the world. Just to wrap up with the final question, then, when all is said and done, what's the legacy you want to leave behind?
Oh my God. I don't think I've been asked that question before. I would say that in change, there is great power, and that I inspire people to unpack their lives and repurpose it and live the life they were meant to.
I love that. Thank you so much for taking the time to share.
Thank you. This was fun. Thank you.
No, I'm glad you had a good time. So what's the best place for people to find out more about you, the work that you're doing, your books, all of that sort of stuff?
My website is rethinklife.today, and my Instagram is Monica Berg 74.
Perfect. And then the rest of so which book is out right now? So is it Fear Is Not an Option? That's the only one that's out on Amazon?
Yes, and I have a weekly blog that comes out, and the other two will be out soon.
Perfect. Yeah, let me know when they're out, because then I'll drop a link to those as well, and hopefully we'll do a part 2.
Amazing. Thank you so much.